What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope all of you guys have had a great week. Got a jam-packed show for you today. The Minnesota Timberwolves got a huge win over the Oklahoma City Thunder last night. They've won 9 out of 13, and Anthony Edwards is showing a very interesting side of his game that wasn't on display in the early part of the year, thanks to some offensive production out of the front court. We're going to be talking about that. After that, we're going to get into the Golden State Warriors getting a huge win on the road against the Houston Rockets. Going to talk a little bit about Moses Moody and Brandon Podziemski and the way that their roles have become more defined and how that has helped them. And then after that, like we do always on Fridays, a mailbag going to be bouncing around the league, a bunch of Lakers stuff, a bunch of Knicks stuff, a bunch of other stuff from other teams around the league. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. And it's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. Don't forget about our brand new social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook where we're releasing content throughout the year. And last but not least, if you want to get questions in these mailbags, in the YouTube comments, the word mailbag with a colon, write your question. That's how I sift them out of all those comments. Drop the mailbag questions in those YouTube comments, and we'll get to them on Fridays throughout the remainder of the season. All right, let's talk some basketball. So, Timberwolves get a huge win against the Thunder last night. They've won 9 out of 13. They are 8th in offense over that span, to go with also being 5th in defense, 6th in net rating. Several quality wins in that span, too, against Denver, Dallas, Atlanta, Phoenix, Houston, and then last night culminating with the win against Oklahoma City. That's a hell of a run. And most of it is centered around they're scoring the ball at a much more efficient clip to allow their defense to push them over the top. And that's come down to the recent surge of Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid. Jaden McDaniels, in this span, in this 13-game stretch, 16 points per game to go with 7 rebounds, 37% from 3 on 4 attempts per game. He's finally starting to hit some shots. He's also doing more self-creation. In the last 4 games, Jaden McDaniels has scored 16 points as the ball handler in ball screens. So he's doing some stuff on the ball as well. Naz Reid, since Julius Randle went down, in his last 7 games, 21 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 60% true shooting, just frying teams and pick and pop action. He's scoring out of the post. He's up to 1.23 points per post up, including passes this year. Only 53 reps, but he's been doing it a lot more, obviously, as of late, as they've been leaning on him more. Just a bunch of excellent footwork and finishing moves going both directions. You know, I always talk about with big guys, there being like a heavy emphasis on short range shot making, like hook shots and floaters. Naz Reid is 50 for 94 this season on floaters and hooks. That's 53%. He's been really, really effective in that range. And he's been one of the very best jump shooters in the entire NBA this year. A Naz Reid jump shot of any kind has been worth 1.21 points per shot this year. Among the 82 players in the NBA to take at least 300 jump shots this season, Naz Reid ranks 3rd in overall efficiency. A little trivia for you guys. Who do you think's above him? Number 2 is Norman Powell. Number 1, the guy who's been super hot as of late, Gary Trent Jr., the best jump shooter in the league at volume this year. But this is the important detail. Obviously, Naz Reid's been incredible. It's been a revelation. He was the guy who's getting a lot of the big buckets. The 2 guys that really stood out to me at the end of the Thunder game were Naz Reid scoring the ball and then Luka Garza just kicking the Thunder's ass on the glass there underneath the basket, doing a bunch of damage during their late game run. But the extra production out of the front court offensively has opened things up for Ant to be more of a downhill scorer. And he's been playing his best ball of the season. Anthony Edwards' last 10 games, 33 points per game, 6 rebounds and 5 assists, 60% true shooting. And here's the big difference. Here's the obvious difference between before and how things look now. He's getting to the basket more. In the previous 44 games before this 10-game stretch, to start the season, he was getting to the restricted area for a shot just 4.1 times per game. In the last 10 games, he's at 6.1. So literally a 50% increase there. And get this. His free throw attempts per game in this 10-game span have doubled. He was at 5 free throws per game in the first 44 games of the season. He's at 10 free throws per game in the last 10 games. So a legit 50% increase in attempts at the rim and doubling his free throw attempts. An interesting case study and something I've been talking about for years now, which is like, what would it look like if we just gave Anthony Edwards better spacing? By the way, that's with Rudy Gobert playing for the most part. But because Jaden McDaniels is scoring the basketball, knocking down spot-up jump shots at a higher clip, because Naz Reid is shooting better than anybody in the league except for a handful of guys this year, you're getting a lot of space for Ant to operate, and he's getting downhill and getting to the free throw line more than he had by a substantial margin compared to the beginning of the season. And that's the exciting part. And that's what I kind of envision as the big picture goal for this team as we get into like further iterations of it. I want to see Ant play with space. That's his superpower. His superpower is downhill. And I understand he can settle for tough shots sometimes. Like, it was interesting. I saw a bunch of Wolves fans lamenting the step back three that he took late in the game against the Bucks. And like, I get it. Under the circumstances, you'd prefer a better shot. But like, he was attacking. He got a really clean look at a mid-range jump shot a couple possessions earlier where he pump faked and the dude ran by and he was like stand still 14 feet from the basket. That's just a great look. He had a beautiful driving skip pass to Naz Reid in the corner for the shot that it would either tie the game or gave him the lead. I can't remember exactly. I think it put him up by 2, if I remember correctly. Like, Ant is doing some attacking. He is doing getting closer, better shots in those situations. He just didn't love the shot that he got at the very end of the game. But at the same time, like, I kind of like respect Ant in that situation in the sense that like he's been working relentlessly on that shot. It's been one of the most efficient shots in all of basketball this year. Is just Anthony Edwards taking a three of any kind. I think you had an opportunity there to go for the win. Again, ideally you get something a little more reliable, but I have a feeling Ant's going to hit some big ones like that over the years. And he has, by the way. There was several examples this year where he's been able to go to that shot and knock it down when it matters. It's just he's leaning a little much on variance there, and that's where him working closer to the basket, he can compete or contend against his own variance and rely a little bit less on long distance shot making. But I mean, he's one of the best 3-point shooters in the league this year, so I can't like just say it's a terrible shot. You know, you could just argue that he could have gotten something better. But again, we are getting some of the best basketball of Anthony Edwards' career just by virtue of him getting real scoring pop out of the 3 and 4 spot. Again, you're getting like damn near 37 points a game out of those guys in the last month. Like that's gonna just make life so much easier compared to the early part of the season when there was just very little in the way of shot making in that front court. But I have one more note I wanted to hit on before we move on from the Wolves. I thought Minnesota really mauled Oklahoma City physically in that fourth quarter. They held them to just 14 points. They flipped the game into a blowout when it was tied in the third quarter. They chewed them up on the glass. They had 20 offensive rebounds. I talked earlier about how Luka Garza just absolutely destroyed them on the offensive glass there in that run that they went on in the fourth quarter. And they guarded Shai better than anyone has all year. It was the first time this entire season that anyone has held Shai to below 25 points on less than 30% shooting. It's only the second time this year at all that any team held him below 30% shooting. They did a number on him. It reminded me of what happened in the Denver Game 7 last year, if you guys remember. Minnesota really ratcheted up the physical intensity and just basically ran him over the rest of the way on both ends of the floor. And it got me thinking as I was watching last night. And I was recording with the Nerd Sesh guys earlier today. It was a fun one. You guys will get to see that if you go to the Nerd Sesh channel. Carson and I vehemently disagreed about. I had the Lakers on the same tier with Denver, and he just views there as a gap, there being a gap there, and we got into this like debate for like 25 minutes about it. You guys will enjoy that. But it got me thinking about the contender tiers. And then after I finished that recording, I went and watched Minnesota, Oklahoma City, and as I'm watching that, I'm just sitting there thinking, like, are we underrating Minnesota because we're forgetting that when we get to the postseason, their physicality is just a huge problem? Do you guys remember how the Suns just killed the Wolves last year in the regular season, including on like 2 days before the series started? Then what happened? They got absolutely annihilated in the playoffs. They beat the shit out of Phoenix, in large part because they ratchet up that physicality. And that's the environment where that trait becomes the most valuable. And there are tricky things here. Like, you got to figure out where Julius Randle fits into all of this. But to me, Minnesota has shown some real upside. They have 11 wins now against teams in the top 10 in point differential. That's the fourth most in the entire NBA. Top 6 in both offense and defensive rating in those matchups against top 10 point differential teams. Again, that top 6 offense is interesting to me, and it just goes to show you, like, their athletes can get to spots and can score even when the intensity ratchets up. Wolves playing some great basketball. Moving on to the Warriors versus the Rockets. Really good defensive effort from the Warriors in this one. They were doubling Alperen Şengün and rotating out of it well without giving up any advantage. They were doing a lot of short closing out, like baiting on the indecisive shooters from Houston that will shoot when they're wide open, but if you kind of stunt at them, they might pump fake and try to drive. And they were just focusing more on containing the ball instead of chasing people off the three-point line, keeping the ball in front, making Houston make jump shots. But I thought the story of the game was the role player contributions. They got 28 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists with only 1 turnover from Moses Moody and Brandon Podziemski. And so I wanted to kind of zoom in on this concept of role player depth because this was something I was harping on a lot before the Jimmy Butler trade. I talked a lot leading into the Jimmy Butler trade about the idea that you can afford to lose some role player depth with this group. If all 15 of your guys can realistically play a role, but only one guy can play a lead role, you're going to get diminishing returns. It's obvious in the rotation. Pods is averaging 33 minutes per game since the Jimmy Butler trade. As a result, he's in more of a rhythm. He's averaging 15.6 rebounds and 5 assists with 2 steals per game in that span. That's an excellent set of production. Before the trade, his minutes were all over the place. Averaged 24 minutes. He had 10 games where he didn't even get to 20 minutes. Why? Because they had a million rotation players. So Kerr's always trying new things. Oh, this guy's not playing well. I'll try somebody else. And like there was a shorter leash on everybody. The rotation was bouncing around. It was tricky, and that's what happens when you have so many guys that can play. Now he's averaging 33 minutes per game. He's getting starter minutes consistently. Big shock. He's playing his best basketball of the season. Moses Moody was like a redundancy with Andrew Wiggins before the Jimmy trade. His minutes were crazy sporadic. Before the trade, 18 minutes per game. He had 4 games where he didn't even reach 10 minutes. He was a garbage time guy some nights. He had 25 games this season where he failed to reach 20 minutes. You could argue that's a waste of Moses Moody. He's capable of doing more. The Jimmy Butler trade balanced the roster more, gave him a more clear-cut role. He's averaging 30 minutes per game since the trade. And he's struggling to shoot the ball a little bit. And by the way, that's part of what happens when your workload increases. You lose your legs a little bit. I think the shots will fall once he gets more used to his higher minute load. But I think he's been fantastic overall as like a defender, closeout attacker. He's contributing well. I think he's giving you a reasonable facsimile of what Andrew Wiggins did. Everyone was so concerned about gutting the team's depth. Last night, Gary Payton II didn't play. Trace Jackson Davis is still completely out of the rotation because Quentin Post is playing so much better than him. Kerr ran a 10-man rotation last night, and you had 2 guys that absolutely could play that were out. Gary Payton's hurt, but the point is like, you still have depth. You still have guys that can play, except for now you have Jimmy Butler on your team. And you've won 3 out of 4 while on a really tough road trip, including beating the Bucks in Milwaukee and beating the Rockets in Houston. It was just about balancing things out. There were a lot of guys in Golden State Warriors jerseys that were capable of doing more role player stuff. But instead, you were asking those role players to do more star stuff and then bitching that they were all inconsistent. Of course they are. They're being asked to do stuff that's beyond their pay grade. Now you've balanced things out better. And I think that we will continue to see the rewards being reaped by Golden State throughout the rest of the season as a result of that. They ended up going up by 24 in this game, and the inevitable Houston ball pressure and physicality came, right? Like they always bring that. That's part of beating Houston in Houston. That's just how it goes. They do it to everybody. Their bench guys come in, they just start playing super hard. They're big, they're athletic. They can make a mess of things in a good way for Houston. I thought you could see Golden State's younger players get a little sped up and start making some mistakes. The one that was the dead giveaway to me was when Guy Santos got that pretty open three in the left corner, but there was a pretty hard closeout, and he like panicked and shot it off the corner of the backboard. That's kind of an example of what it looks like when players are rushing, right? But I've always found it fascinating how the best players in the world just somehow seem to slow down when things speed up like that. Steph just kept making plays by weaponizing their aggression against them. He had a huge three on the left wing off of a pump fake where he just pump faked, waited for the guy to go by, and then just calmly settled into that three above the break on the left wing and knocked it down. It was a huge shot in the game that put him back up 7. And then the action that iced the game, a play I loved. They put Pods and Moody on the right wing and corners out of the way. And Draymond Green's in the left corner. Steph's right under the basket. Jimmy Butler's got the ball in the left wing. And all he does is just pitch it to Draymond and back cut off of Steph. And Jae'Sean Tate, hesitates because he's not sure if they're switching or not, which, by the way, that's what happens when you're playing against Steph Curry. He's going to cause confusion with your switching because you don't want to leave Steph. Draymond throws a beautiful bounce pass to Jimmy Butler for a dunk. Every time I watch that group, it just seems like such a more dynamic trio to run 3-man action and just to have versatility on both ends of the floor. It makes a lot of sense for me. It's an impressive win on the road. They're 3-1 so far with Jimmy, 15th in offense, 4th in defense. On the Rockets front, it's just a tough matchup for them without Fred VanVleet. Draymond Green gave Şengün all sorts of issues, held him to 4 for 10 shooting, only 4 assists and 3 turnovers. The Warriors just swarmed every Jalen Green drive, and of course, Jalen Green just never wants to pass out of those drives. I thought Aaron Holiday did an admirable job of trying to fill the Fred VanVleet role, but this team just really needs advantages to succeed, and they didn't have anybody who could consistently generate advantages except through the strength of their defense and trying to run out in transition, which worked until Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond just reasserted control because they're the grown-ups that can slow down and play patient, disciplined basketball. Little shout-outs for Jock Landale and Nate Williams. I thought they did the majority of the damage during that run just by playing hard, grabbing rebounds, pressuring the rim. Jock Landale's shooting was valuable in that run as well. Again, they're going to be fine. They're playing a lot of weird lineups right now. We saw Jeff Green last night. Reed Shepherd, who's been bad, is still playing a lot. The Rockets are just in a little bit of a funk right now that has to do with injuries to core guys in their rotation. Who's scoring big in the NBA this season? You are, with all the new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From monster slams to dishing the rock to cleaning the glass, get behind your favorite players in the prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like picking how many points your favorite player will have. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Right now, the Oklahoma City Thunder have supplanted the Celtics as the favorite on DraftKings to win the title at plus 230. The Celtics in second at plus 250. And the Los Angeles Lakers leapt all the way up to the 5th best title odds right now at plus 1,500. First time, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, let's get to our mailbag. First thing, before we get into any questions, I always have to clarify this. Guys, I don't make the thumbnails. I am in charge of content. The volume is in charge of distribution. They are the people that come up with the marketing strategy for the show. If you see a thumbnail, that's not something that, or a title or something like that. I have no say in anything like that. I'm just here making the content. So I just say that because I constantly see comments of people freaking out about the thumbnails. And that's just not something I have anything to do with. It seems more likely than not that Mitchell Robinson and OG Anunoby will return to the Knicks after the All-Star break. Does it make sense for the Knicks to experiment with Mitch in the starting lineup alongside Cat, or should he continue to come off the bench considering how well the current starting lineup has been performing? I think you absolutely have to experiment with Karl Anthony Towns alongside Mitchell Robinson. There's several reasons for this. One, it's a matchup thing. I've always just been a big believer that you want to have different looks when you get into the postseason if you can afford it. It's one of the big reasons why I'm bummed out about the Lakers not getting a center. I believe in their small ball looks. I think their small ball looks are going to be tough to contend with. But I think it's advantageous if a situation arises in the postseason and you need to go bigger, that you're able to do so, right? Not the least of which is for Nikola Jokic, right? As far as New York goes, there's not necessarily a team there are certain teams. Milwaukee is an example of a team, especially with Kyle Kuzma now, that can provide a very big front line to where you might want to try to match size for size. I think a big part of it is the defensive flexibility. A big part of what's caused problems for the Knicks defense over the course of the season is teams picking on Brunson and Cat, usually at the same time, getting Cat into the screening action after they bring Brunson in onto the primary ball handler as a defender by just setting an early screen with a guard or something along those lines, right? But if you have a legitimate rim protector like Mitchell Robinson behind the play, or if you can bring Mitchell Robinson up into action and have Karl Anthony Towns operate as a low man, that's just a more achievable defensive role for Cat. If Cat knows I've got help on the back line, or I don't have to be the guy that's coming up into these ball screens, that goes a long way towards giving you an easier job for Cat to do. Like, for instance, right now, Cat is pretty much guarding the center as often as you can imagine to try to give him an achievable defensive role. You can tuck him away on a weak forward if you have a center that can guard the opposing center. I think it's absolutely worth trying to build out that look, even though, yeah, you're obviously going to stagger them a lot throughout the game. It's only been 2 games, but have you seen any differences in how the Lakers are using Luka as opposed to Dallas? Here's the thing. Luka's been very unaggressive over the course of the first 2 games. That's been, especially the first, like the game on Wednesday was just one of the worst Laker efforts of the season. I basically just crumple up that game and throw it away. The Monday game, though, like LeBron and Austin were super aggressive, like right out the gates, and Luka was kind of passive and just kind of watching things and not really getting very involved in the offense. I don't think either of those games represent what this is going to look like. My guess is that JJ Redick over the course of this weekend and running into practice on Monday and Tuesday is going to heavily emphasize at least either specific lineups that will flow through Luka, or even with the starting lineup, asking LeBron and Austin to just play off of Luka more and let Luka get the ball. Because, like, again, Luka's best asset to this team is shot creation. You could argue the more you put on Luka offensively, the more you can rely on LeBron as a defender and as a rebounder. The more you can rely on Austin as like a closeout attacker, as like guess what? Austin is a capable defender. This is one of the things Carson and I got into an argument with about earlier today. But like Austin, when he doesn't have to do everything on offense, he actually can be a dependable defensive player at the guard position. Not a great defender, but he can be a good defender. Shouldn't be guarding the other team's best player, but he can guard. And so, like, putting him in a situation where he doesn't have to do as much offensively is advantageous in this situation, right? So, like, I think we will see a lot more Luka heliocentric type of stuff coming out of the All-Star break. But the flip side of that is, what did I talk about after the finals with Dallas? I talked about how there's certain limitations on heliocentric basketball, and there is an upside to Luka being more of a willing, like, cog in an offensive system rather than just the head of the snake, because it'll give them more versatility against the best defenses. And here's the bottom line. Like, when they play against the best defenses, like when they play against Oklahoma City, it's not going to be Luka picking them apart and just throwing out for catch and shoot threes. It's going to have to be against an elite defense like that skip pass, driving a closeout, really good driving kick possessions, deliberate offense to get great shots, and that is going to require all 3 of them. It might be Luka running the first ball screen, but it might be LeBron attacking on the skip, or Austin cutting along the baseline after LeBron attacks off the skip. It might be 3, 4, 5 attacks on a possession before they actually get what they want out of it. And so, again, like, I think it'll be a lot more heliocentric post All-Star break, but I do think we're going to see a good amount of equal opportunity basketball from them against the best teams in the league. Hey, Jason, longtime listener. Congrats on all your success. I noticed a few months ago you tweeted out a Stanley Johnson and how he should be on an NBA roster. Sure enough, the Lakers get him on their G League team. Are you someone that ever watches the G League? And if so, would you ever do a segment on G League guys or out-of-country guys we should watch, or who you think are ready to play in the NBA? So I've just found that the NBA itself is so damn difficult to cover just because of the sheer amount of games, the sheer amount of teams, that, like, I don't focus on scouting much at all. Like, when we get into July or late June, I should say, I will spend time learning as much as I can about draft prospects in that short period of time. But, like, there are people that devote a lot more time and energy to scouting outside of the NBA. And those people are just going to do a much better job than I could ever hope to do. So I'm a big believer in, like, I'd rather be great at this than try to have my hands in, like, 6 different pots, but that I'm not particularly good at any of them, right? So, like, I really like to focus on NBA basketball. That said, Stanley Johnson, I do think, is a guy that could play at the NBA level. He's a career 6 rebounds and 2 stocks per 36 minutes in the NBA. Like, he's a useful athlete. He does have switchability. He's a fire hydrant that's difficult to go through. And the biggest issue was he couldn't shoot. And over the course of the last 2 seasons in the G League, he's shooting 41% from 3 on 5 attempts per game. I don't think the Lakers are going to pick him up. I think if they converted a wing, it'll be Jordan Goodwin. But like, if you told me Stanley Johnson was on this roster, I would be happy with it because I like Stanley. And I'm a little biased too because I'm from Tucson, Arizona. He came through Arizona. Stanley and I played against and with each other at times while he was here, just playing pickup and stuff. So I'm a big fan of Stanley. But that said, I do think that he can help. And I hope he gets another opportunity in the NBA at some point. And with the growth as a shooter and with his impactfulness as an athlete, I think he should get that opportunity. With Matas Buzelis now hitting the double-digit scoring mark 8 games in a row and Zach LaVine gone, what can/should the Bulls do this season to ensure they are rebuilding the right way? Continue to give him the ball as much as possible. Everything about being bad with a purpose has big picture goals, right? Like, if you're going to be bad, you want to be bad while accumulating assets, and you want to be bad while evaluating young talent. I've joked about how, like, a lot of times when you're in rebuilding, you'll take on bad contracts, with draft compensation being the reward for the bad contracts. Then what ends up happening is you have a bunch of guys on these rookie deals where they're making somewhere between, $2 and $8 million a year that are on these like cost-controlled contracts that you're actually playing while you tank. Those guys, you need to determine which ones of those guys can be extended, should be extended, are part of your big picture goals as a franchise and the team that you're trying to build. You need to find out what Matas Buzelis is. Is he just like a Michael Porter Jr. weak side wing defender, rebounder, guy who attacks with an advantage? Or is he a guy that can run action and run a lot of it? Right? Like, that's the kind of stuff that you got to figure out, because which one of those two players he becomes plays a big role. You might find out, he'll never be good enough defensively for this to work. Okay, well, we need to find out. We need to play him large amounts of minutes, give him lots of repetition, right? And so the best thing you could do is put the ball in his hands and just find out what this kid is capable of in these moments where you can afford to give him that opportunity. As currently constructed, where do you believe that the expectations should be for the Lakers this postseason? I'm borderline wanting to consider them contenders because of the sheer fact that they have Luka and LeBron, who are two of the most consistent guys in the league, but I want to be cautious. I'm going to say exactly what I said to the Nerd Sesh guys earlier today. I don't know what the Lakers are going to be. I haven't seen them play nearly enough basketball. I need to see a lot more. That said, there's somewhere between, in my opinion, a second-tier contender and a third-tier contender. To me right now, I kind of view as like Boston, OKC at the top. I'm starting to slot Cleveland in that second tier these days. Denver, to me, is in that second tier. The Lakers are either going to be in that second tier with Denver and Cleveland or in the tier right below, but we need to watch them play a lot more basketball. I think, here's the thing, if they're a second tier contender, let's say that we end up putting them in that second tier, I'm still worried about a Jokic matchup. I'm still really worried about a Celtics matchup because the same reasons that Dallas struggled last year trying to guard Boston at times, right? So, like, I think they have matchup weaknesses, but I also just put this, like, simple... I presented this to Carson today. If it's LeBron, Luka, Austin, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Rui, how are you getting stops against the Lakers in a big spot? Like, how? Who are you helping off of? Dorian Finney-Smith is a knockdown three-point shooter. Rui can drive closeouts. Austin can drive closeouts. LeBron can drive closeouts. Luka can drive closeouts. You can't leave any of them open. Like, they're going to have legitimate 5-out spacing with that group. Like, LeBron and Luka should be able to get to the rim whenever they want. Okay, you have a big enough... Let's take Oklahoma City, for example. They have Lou Dort. They're going to put Lou Dort on Luka, and it's going to make life really difficult for Luka. Okay, who's guarding LeBron? Jalen Williams? Like, LeBron's going to do a lot of damage to Jalen Williams. You know what I mean? So, like, that's not to say that I would pick the Lakers over the Thunder. I don't know. I honest to God, I'm not going to give you guys my, like, contender ranking for the Lakers until I watch them play a lot more basketball. They're a brand new theoretical team right now that's played the Utah Jazz twice. They tried in one game and kicked the shit out of them. They didn't try in the next game and got their shit kicked out of them. So, like, I don't know exactly what they're going to be yet. We will find out. But, like, I mean, LeBron is 40 years old, and he's a championship or bust kind of guy. And I'm sure that he thinks that they can win. And I would imagine they're going to view anything other than them winning as a failure. But, like, I don't know what they're going to be. And we just need to see a lot more basketball before we can make that kind of decision. So with the Mark Williams trade falling through, the Lakers are obviously aiming for free agency to grab that lob threat big. How would you feel about Jalen Duren to the Lakers? He's only 21 years old, 6'10", 250 pounds, and is a lob threat, and is a free agent this summer. He's also averaging 70% from the field. And I know it's early, but any realistic free agents you see on the Lakers. I have a hard time believing Detroit's just going to give up on Jalen Duren. He's had some issues with like guarding on the perimeter against stretch fives, but I think he's been really good outside of that. And is a really nice fit with Cade. Got good hands, finishes everything around the basket. So, I mean, when I look at this summer for the Lakers, I think they're going to be keying in on guys like Rob Williams, Nick Claxton, guys in that like less than $25 million a year range that they think they can piece together a couple of guys to just match salary and get. I'm inclined to say Robert Williams because he's a little bit more affordable, but Nick Claxton would be a little bit more of a big picture option because he's younger and it doesn't have the injury history. Actually, I think Nick Claxton might be a little older than Rob Williams. I'm actually not sure which one of those guys is younger, but his body's younger. He hasn't been as injured in his career as Robert Williams has been. But my guess is that they'll kind of key in on those two guys this summer. Nuggets in 4. Just kidding, but not so much. Without AD, I don't see how the Lakers stand a chance against Jokic. How do you feel about the Lakers versus Nuggets? Playoffs with the current rosters, injuries aside. Got into this with Carson today extensively, like I said, so you guys can find that on the Nerd Sesh feed. But, like, again, the way I look at it, like, I don't think the Lakers are going to be able to guard Denver, but I also don't think Denver is going to be able to guard the Lakers. So if neither team can stop the other team from getting good shots, it's going to be a shot-making series. So I think it'll come down to, like, game planning. Like, will Mike Malone be able to punish the Lakers for playing guys like Jackson Hayes, Jared Vanderbilt, right? Will JJ Redick be able to punish Mike Malone for playing guys like Christian Brown or Russell Westbrook, right? And both of those guys have been awesome this year, right? And so like it's one of those things where like I don't think either team has an answer. Like Carson was saying, like there's nobody on this team that can stop Jokic from getting a great shot. You're absolutely right. But I'm going to present you the exact same thing I just said earlier. If Denver has to guard a lineup with LeBron, Luka, Austin, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Rui Hachimura, how are they going to stop the Lakers from getting good shots? How? They're not going to be able to. So, like, I think it would be a very, very high scoring series relative to other playoff series. I think it would be a very interesting playoff series. I will admit freely that as a Lakers fan, when I saw this trade go down in the aftermath, the two teams that I got legitimately concerned about were Denver and Boston. So, like, for the record, I would be scared in that kind of matchup. But I just think, given how theoretical the Lakers are, I think it'd be foolish just to completely write them off. 4 more. Hey, Jason, with the Spurs now falling to 23 and 29 and the refusal to replace Chris Paul in the starting lineup with Stephon Castle, do you think the Spurs should semi-tank the rest of the season to secure 2 lottery picks, other via Atlanta, to help complete their rebuild? I think that the entire purpose behind making a De'Aaron Fox move is to advance the timeline, specifically to appease Victor Wembanyama and his competitive nature, but also to get these guys reps so you can start to learn. You have a core now. Your core is Fox, Vassell, Castle, Wemby, Sohan, right? Like that's your core 5 guys that you're building around. You need to get those guys into a high leverage situation against an elite team in a playoff series so that you can learn about what they need to be supported with over the course of the next few years. So again, they're in a tough spot, but you go for it. You absolutely go for it. You want to find as much high leverage basketball for these guys as early as possible. That was the entire purpose behind the De'Aaron Fox trade. Do you think that LeBron and Jokic are the only players in NBA history to have seen every adjustment, every coverage, every double, or blitz thrown, and have always found new angles to dominate the game at the level they've dominated for so long and with such offensive consistency? I don't think it's only those two. I generally think that all basketball players have gotten better, even just in this era. I think Steph Curry is another guy where like he's competed against switching by just running around like crazy and forcing teams to make mistakes when they're switching. He's beat switching big looks by just attacking them off the bounce. Famously did a lot of picking on Horford and Robert Williams in the NBA Finals in 2022. He's a drop coverage killer. He annihilated the Celtics drop coverage for the most part over the course of that series, which is a big part of why they had to switch at times, right? Like he's done a ton of blitz him. Yeah, be my guest. That was literally how they won the 2015 finals. That was how Andre Iguodala got finals MVP. So like, I think he's countered all these different coverages as well. Again, like when I think about like peaks, I think Jokic has reached an offensive peak that no player ever has. I think LeBron has reached a two-way peak that no player ever has. And I think at LeBron's peak, Steph was also about as good on the offensive end of the floor when he was at that point. So, like, again, they all have like these different kind of calling cards, but there are definitely a lot of players in NBA history that have overcome anything a coach can do. Like Michael Jordan wasn't a guy that in the 90s was struggling with any specific coverage, if that makes sense. Why aren't people, including you, talking about what the Thunder are doing? At the All-Star break, they have the best net rating of all time, as well as the best relative defense ever. I just don't understand why they're not being talked about at all, much less like the all-time great team they've been to this point. It's not a small sample size anymore. Couple things. I did just talk about them yesterday, I think. We just got into them in the defensive run that they went on at the tail end of the game against, was it the Miami Heat? Yeah, Miami Heat. And I talked about their defense and how it was so exceptionally great. The other thing, too, is like the dominant regular season team is always the least interesting NBA regular season story. It's unfair that it works that way, but it's just the reality. Like, there's no debate about it. There is debate surrounding bad teams or teams that have more significant flaws, because then you can argue these are their flaws or these are their strengths, right? Like, it's kind of weird how it works in the NBA, how the teams that dominate kind of disappear into the top and the teams that suck disappear into the bottom. And then we spend all this time debating the middle tier. Like, that's kind of like how it works for whatever reason. So I understand that I don't talk about the Thunder as much as I do some of the other teams in the league, but we do talk about them. We hit them a few times a month, and we just hit them earlier this week. I have a similar type of response to the all-time great stuff that I do with Boston. Like, I don't think all-time great is something you accomplish in the regular season. I don't think it's something you accomplish with advanced metrics. I think it's something you accomplish with multiple deep playoff runs where you win multiple championships. That's how you achieve all-time great. It's just a different kind of like goalpost for me, I guess. I view the Thunder as kind of like a combination of a legitimate championship contender while also being a little bit Houston Rocketsy, in the sense that, like, they're young and freakishly athletic and they're playing harder than everybody every night. That's going to go a long way in the 82. So, like, on the one hand, I view them as a legitimate contender, but I don't think they're as good as their record or their net rating would lead you to believe. And they still have some big question marks to me. Like, Minnesota kind of mauled them in the fourth quarter yesterday. Got a bunch of stops, ate them up on the offense. They had 20 offensive rebounds in that game. And like, I do think about certain teams that have physical size mismatches that they can present. I do worry about the multiple times this year in big spots, whether it's against a good team on the road or whether it's in the in-season tournament championship, where their offense just falls apart. And it becomes, can Shai make shots? And he takes a lot of mid-range shots that he just has to hit at a super high efficiency for them to be worth it, right? And he does, for the record. But like, there's a certain amount of like frailty with them that I see with every team in the league except for basically Boston. And even then, there's a little bit of frailty just in their defending championship itis, where they've been so sloppy with their shot selection at times this year. That's my bad. I have the Mitchell Robinson one in here again, so I already hit that one. So we're actually done for the day. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting me and supporting the show. I hope you guys enjoy the weekend. We'll be back on Monday. We'll enjoy the All-Star break. We're gonna do some stuff. The games get started back up on Wednesday, but we're gonna do some stuff on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like contender rankings, maybe a check-in with the Nerd Sesh guys. We'll see. We're gonna do some stuff in early next week to kill time before we get into the rest of the season. But again, as always, I appreciate you guys, and I will see you next week.